Opinion polls and surveys show that the top issue is the economy. People's pocketbook issues. Are they able to go to the grocery store and buy what they want and pay for their rent and all of that? Close to 50% of U.S. voters saying the economy is extremely important. And then the second top two issues, about 4 in 10 Americans attach the same importance to abortion and women's reproductive rights and crime.
But for many people outside the United States, the issue of democracy when it comes to the United States is also very important. Do you find that the media has covered this issue enough?
That's an excellent question, James. And I have to say, as in many issues here in the U.S., it's kind of a partisan issue, and the country is almost equally divided. We had the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, an attempt to interrupt the peaceful transfer of power in this country. And we've had the Congressional Committee investigating it, and we've had hearings on that with millions of people watching. But most of those watching have been Democrats. And so, Democrats are paying attention to this issue. As you rightly said, I think people overseas are paying perhaps a bit more attention to these, midterm, congressional and statewide and local elections more because they're sort of holding their breath and they want to see where Americans stand on this issue. And it'll be interesting to see not only if Republicans or Democrats win, but also what type of candidates, because among the Republicans, we do have some who are basically, not vowing to recognize the results of elections. So this is a worrisome thing, as you said, to many people, both here in the U.S. and especially abroad.
We hear repeatedly, Cindy, about control of Congress. Why does this matter? After all, President Biden will still be president of the United States no matter what happens on Tuesday.
Yes, you're right. He will still be president. Of course, he is a Democrat. But as far as what he wants to accomplish, and one of the things is basically, trying to get voting rights, especially for minorities in this country, more protected and to pass laws through Congress. So that's why it's so important, whether Democrats or Republicans hold a majority in both houses of Congress. And it's very, very close right now, with Democrats holding a slim majority in the House and Republicans expected to win control of the House on this election day. As usually the president, whoever's in the White House, his party usually takes a big beating at the polls after 2 years. So that is kind of expected. We'll have to wait and see when the votes are counted. But also the Senate, Democrats have the smallest of majorities, a 1-vote majority at the moment, and Republicans would just need to overturn that one, although that comes down to a lot of very close races.
Talk about the so-called battleground states. Why are these important?
Right. We have most states in the U.S. are either, really majority Republican, like mainly in the South. And then we have some in the Northeast, which are, clear majorities of Democratic voters. And then we have these so-called battleground states, such as Pennsylvania, Arizona, North Carolina, and Ohio, where they go back and forth depending on the candidates. Sometimes, Democrats are elected, sometimes Republicans are elected. So these are being very closely watched, and also some out west in Arizona and Nevada are battleground states where it's very, very close. And even in the South, Georgia is being closely watched with 2 African-American candidates facing off there for the Senate race.
So, Cindy, when do you think Americans will be able to know the results?
We should get some trends as to whether, there's a so-called red wave, which would be Republicans, or whether maybe Democrats are doing better than what we expected by late this evening. But as to whether we really know, which party controls the House or the Senate, that could take longer. And we shouldn't panic if it does. It's just these, all these, millions of mail-in ballots being counted.
Cindy, thank you so much again for joining us on Daybreak Africa.
My pleasure. Thank you.
That was Cindy Saine, VOA's senior diplomatic correspondent, speaking with us from Washington, D.C. Poll watchers from political parties were not the only groups monitoring ballots being cast in America's midterm elections on Tuesday. Some states also welcome observers from other countries under an international agreement. VOA's chief national correspondent Steve Herman was in Alexandria, Virginia, where some foreign monitors visited polling stations.
At a local arts center serving as a polling place, 2 British men walked in late Tuesday morning, but were not there to vote.
We're observers, and this chap's from the Voice of America. Are we okay to just look around for half an hour?
Why don't you go ask the gentleman right there, and I'll go get him for you.
Sure, thank you.
John Alt, the director of Democracy Volunteers, said he and Harry Bush are quick to explain their presence at each of their stops and show their credentials.
We always make sure we introduce ourselves because people are quite surprised when 2 British people turn up at their polling station.
A second official grants them permission to take seats along the wall, and they watch as voters' residencies are verified and secret ballots are cast. The international observers are also taking note about whether those who have mobility challenges have unhindered access. This polling station is unique in offering curbside voting for those who roll up but can't make it inside. Several voters we spoke with outside expressed mixed feelings about international observers monitoring their neighborhood polling station. Ed Schatz is an environmental lawyer.
I suppose it's a little disconcerting that Americans, who are supposed to be a bastion of democracy, need election observers, but I'd rather have them than not.
Here's retired teacher Lori Farnsworth.
It kind of, I guess, bolsters our heritage, our democratic heritage, and maybe will encourage us to step up and take pride in democracy.
Ed Myers recently retired as an Army officer.
I think it's great. I think they should. This is the best country in the world, so come and learn from the best, is my opinion.
El Rashid Ibrahim is a taxi driver, originally from Sudan.
We are the top priority of the democracy in the world. We should monitoring the other country, not the other country monitoring us.
The Sudanese immigrant adds he is one voter who does not take this right for granted, because in his native country, a struggle is underway to restore democracy. Steve Herman, VOA News, Alexandria, Virginia.
The Employment and Labor Relations Court has ordered striking Kenya Airways pilots to resume work unconditionally. At the same time, Justice M. Mwari has barred the airline from taking any disciplinary action against the pilots. Their strike has paralyzed activities at Kenyan airports since Saturday morning when the pilots downed their tools. Marie Ojiambo reports.
I hear what you're saying. Even if you go to jail, it's not a solution right now. Can we obey the court order and go back to work?
After a push and pull from Kenya Airways Management and the Kenya Airline Pilots Association, KALPA, Kenya's Employment and Labor Relations Court has ordered pilots to resume work without failure. The pilots had defied the court orders and proceeded to strike on Saturday after failing to resolve a dispute over pension contributions and settlement of deferred pay, paralyzing Kenya Airways. While issuing a court order on Tuesday, Justice Anne Mwaure said that the airline's management and pilots should engage in dialogue to resolve the matter at hand as pilots resume work.
On that, the court strongly admonishes the respondents. The respondent members, and especially the Kenya Airways pilots, to resume their duties as pilots by 6 a.m. on 9th November 2022 unconditionally.
Kenya Airways on Monday issued threats to the striking pilots and even went ahead to advertise job vacancies for pilots who the company said were sabotaging the airline, which is estimated to be losing at least $2.5 million daily. Judge Mwaure has, however, issued an order preventing the airline's management from intimidating the pilots once they return to work.
KQ to allow the pilots to perform their duties without harassing them or intimidating them, and especially by not taking any disciplinary action against any of them pending the hearing and determination of these suits.
In a letter, the airline's chief executive officer, Alan Kilavuka, said that the company plans to cancel its bargaining and recognition agreements with the pilots' union. Kenya Airways lawyer John Ohaga says the pilot's position was too rigid to have meaningful talks with the airline's management.
KQ was not making any concessions until the pilots go to work. That's essentially what we had. So how can KQ negotiate when the pilots have withheld their labor, which is central to an airline?
There was no immediate response to the court order from the pilots union. However, the union's lawyer, Peter Kimani, confirmed receipt of the proposal to return to work that was addressed to the airline.
The respondent has drafted and circulated its own proposal on a formula to return to work. That proposal has been received by the petitioner, the airline.
Kenya Airways has welcomed the court's decision. The company's top management, however, says the path to recovery will be difficult and will require the airline to redouble its efforts to restructure, lower costs, and even increase staff productivity, as well as recover the time, money, and reputation lost. Reporting for VOA's Daybreak Africa, I am Moreno Giambo in Sacramento, California.
You are listening to Daybreak Africa on the Voice of America. I am James Barter in Washington. Today is Wednesday, November 9th. For more Africa news and features, visit our website at voaafrica.com. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, is urging Egyptian authorities to immediately release a rights activist whose life reportedly hangs by a thread after a 7-month hunger strike. Lisa Schlein reports for VOA from Geneva.
British-Egyptian pro-democracy activist Alaa Abdel Fattah has been a thorn in the side of the Egyptian authorities for more than a decade. He has been in and out of prison due to his defense of civil rights and protests against human rights violations by Egyptian security forces. Abdel Fattah currently is serving a 5-year sentence on charges of publishing false news. He began a partial hunger strike in April to protest his imprisonment and cruel conditions of detention. A spokeswoman for the UN High Commissioner, Ravina Shamdasani, says Abdel Fattah stepped up his hunger strike on November 1st. And she says he stopped drinking water on November 6th, the first day of COP27, the UN climate conference, which is being held in Sharm el-Sheikh. She says Abdel Fattah's condition is very fragile, and his dry hunger strike puts his life at acute risk.
We're very concerned for his health, and there is a lack of transparency as well around his current condition. We understand that his family has not been able to contact him over the past couple of days, and there are serious concerns about his health. We again stress the need for him to be urgently, immediately released, and for him to receive the necessary medical treatment as soon as possible.
Abdel Fattah's sister has flown from Britain to Sharm el-Sheikh to campaign on behalf of her brother's release. Shamdasani agrees that COP27 could be a pressure point, as all eyes will be riveted on what comes out of the conference.
We do hope that this will also be an opportunity to improve the human rights situation in Egypt, to insist upon and to secure the release of those people who have been arbitrarily detained, not only in relation to COP27, but over the years for exercise of their rights to freedom of assembly, freedom of expression.
Shamdasani says High Commissioner Turk personally raised the issue of Abdel Fattah's continued imprisonment with Egyptian authorities on Friday. She notes the UN Human Rights Office, as well as UN special rapporteurs, have brought up human rights concerns with the Egyptian government for years. Lisa Schlein for VOA News, Geneva.
The Horn of Africa's record drought has dried up wide areas of land and vegetation, left millions of livestock dead, and threatened the survival of both wildlife and people. To reduce the impact of drought, a Dutch conservation group in Kenya is helping ethnic Maasai to restore parched lands through rainwater harvesting. But with a failed rainy season forecast for the 5th time in a row, some are asking whether conservation efforts will be enough. Reporter Juma Mayanga has more from Amboseli, Kenya.
God remember us with rain, sang a group of ethnic Maasai in a traditional prayer song. The Maasai are herders, so the worst drought in 40 years has been shocking, as Kasaine Ole Sailepi, a Maasai elder, narrates. We have lost nearly all our livestock due to prolonged drought, Sailepi says. As the Maasai, we depend on livestock for livelihoods. That is why we have come together to dig these things, to restore our degraded land and bring back the grass for livestock. The Maasai's Kuku Community Group Ranch is located between Kenya's Tsavo and Amboseli National Parks on the southern border with Tanzania, a sacred place reserved for grazing during droughts. But the record drought biting the Horn of Africa has not spared the ranch, as Timothy Lenaya of the Maasai Wilderness Conservation Trust explains.
The community here is totally in a mess, especially this drought that we are in now, 80% of livestock is normal. So you can imagine the problem is even becoming bigger and bigger with time.
Dutch conservation group Just Dig It is working with the Maasai Wilderness Conservation Trust to help the community restore parched lands. They are digging water bunds, semicircular shaped pits that capture rainwater and then reseeding the areas with grass. But they still need rain to get started. Lana Muller, a conservation ecologist, is a senior project manager at Just Dig It, in charge of the Kenyan project.
You know, if there's some rainfall and the seeds germinate and there's no follow-up rains, the seeds die off, and then, your project can be challenged by that. But fortunately, the environment is so well adapted, even with little rain, the seeds germinate, and that's why we are also really trying to maximize the little rains that we get in the environment.
The green pasture is also needed to prevent human-wildlife conflict. Pauline Paul is a resident of Olorika village. She says what causes elephants to invade farms is lack of water and pasture in the park. So if these grasses grow here, the animals will have their food and water in the park, and we will have peace, she adds. Just Dig It says in the past 2 years, they've built more than 273,000 bulbs, helping to restore nearly 5,000 acres of parched land. Growing and selling hay from grass seed banks has helped employ women, and the trust says the grass restoration is boosting tourism. Lanoi Mitikini was born and brought up in Kuku Ranch. She now works with the Maasai Wilderness Conservation Trust, helping her community restore their ranch.
Through such projects, we are able to improve the tourism footprint in the area, because we have noticed that wildlife come to the restored sites.
As the clouds gather, the Maasai sing for the skies to open and the rains to start coming. Juma Majanga for VOA News, Amboseli, Kenya.
Scientists say changes in climate pose challenges to Zambia's ongoing efforts to combat poverty, reduce food insecurity, and sustainably manage natural resources. Climate projections in Zambia include increases in temperature and more extreme weather, floods and droughts. Kathy Short reports from Lusaka.
As the world grapples with climate change, millions of poor people face increasing challenges such as harmful effects on health, food, water and livelihoods. For the past 5 years, droughts and floods have become common in Zambia. Weather patterns have changed drastically. Edson Konde is the acting director for the Zambia Meteorological Department. He says extreme weather conditions are causing havoc in the country.
A lot of areas, for example, receiving over 100 millimeters of rainfall in 24 hours. Which is quite huge, because those are some of the amounts some areas in Southern Province receive in a month, and you find that they have received that amount in 24 hours. So the results are flooding, flash floods, damage to infrastructure, damage to dams.
One of the biggest drivers of climate change is deforestation, which has reached alarming levels. According to a recent Worldwide Fund for Nature report, Zambia has the highest deforestation rate in Africa and is ranked 5th highest globally. Wood fuel or charcoal is used for energy across the country. Gladys Kabwe is one of the many charcoal traders in Lusaka. She argues that this is the only way she can make a living.
What has led me to trade in charcoal is hardship in life. I'm keeping 5 orphans. I'm also keeping my elderly mother, and I'm a widow.
Linowe Muwela is an environmental activist. He emphasizes the need to address environmental problems in Zambia.
We need to see more of policies that are empowering communities that are dependent on wood fuel, supplying of wood fuel to urban areas. We need to see more policies targeting young people, targeting children on the importance and values of protecting our environment, of planting of trees, and so forth. So the biggest thing we need right now is implementation. Policies are there, and we've seen a lot of political will. What we need is more champions.
Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema says science has shown that the window to save the global environment is closing.
For developing and vulnerable countries like Zambia, which is among the least developed countries with multiple challenges, climate change brings an additional layer of challenges, an additional burden, and aggravates existing ones. Climate change makes it difficult for us to effectively address a number of social economic challenges in order to lift our people from high poverty levels so as to improve their livelihoods.
World leaders and diplomats framed the fight against climate change as a battle for human survival during opening speeches at the COP27 Climate Summit in Egypt on Monday. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres declared that a lack of progress so far has the world speeding down a highway to hell. I'm Kathy Short for VOA News in Lusaka, Zambia.
And that's it for this Wednesday, November 9th edition of Daybreak Africa. We thank you for coming on board with us this morning. For more Africa news and features, visit our website at voaafrica.com. Connect with us on all social media platforms. We are on